Okay, so I have the dry paintings here. Here's an example of a flower, or I said you could do a sun. So here's an example of a sun. So these lines just went straight out. That's the only difference. Now the next step is we're going to draw patterns inside some of the spaces. So if you can draw patterns in your circle, you can draw patterns in your petals, but out here leave it blank. Do not add any patterns in the negative space. For the sun, you can add patterns in the circle, and you can also do those in the ray shapes. Okay, so I'm going to get some colors here. I'm going to start making a pattern. I like to start with some lines first inside a shape. That way I can add some things inside of there. So we can use any kind of lines or shapes to make a pattern. So I'm going to do circles in this one, and then I'm going to skip this line and do circles in the next one so that it repeats. Remember, a pattern is when something repeats, and if you don't repeat it, it's never a pattern. So I have those repeating, and now I'm going to switch colors and maybe do a zigzag line in these spaces. And I even have to go off the ones off the top there. And then I could probably go back again with this color, and I'm going to add some lines inside those triangles from the zigzag. So we are using oil pastels to do our patterns, and oil pastels are similar to crayons, but they have oil in them versus wax. If you have any lines that you maybe painted over, you can go back over them with a black oil pastel, so you can see that looks much nicer. Now I'm going to repeat this pattern again over here. So remember, I started with the lines, and then I'm going to put those dots inside every other line. So you don't have to have every single one repeating on each of those shapes, but within some of them you should. So then my zigzags are next. And then I'm going to go back and put some of those lines in the triangles. Okay, so now what I can do is I could keep adding some patterns around here. I'm going to show you something I can do to the center so that that looks like it's got some sort of pattern. You could do a spiral, which would be like this. I could even add things off of the spiral, so some other lines, and then maybe putting some patterns inside of there. So let me get a color for that space. So maybe I want to do some lines going like this. So I still see the yellow paint, but I'm just putting some patterns inside of there. Maybe some rectangles. So any kind of shapes or lines can be repeated to create a pattern. Maybe some circles inside of those. So you can get creative and make your flower or sun more interesting. Okay, so here is the sun that I finished, adding patterns all throughout.